Hey, this is Jonathan Lewis. Thank you for listening to another Stubby episode. We hope the following question and answer can be helpful to you in your welding and fabrication journey. Thank you to everybody who continues to send in their questions and providing feedback to make the Stubby series better. Without further ado, here is today's question.
What's it like to be an aerospace TIG welder? That is the topic for this Stubby episode. First of all, I think it helps to understand that there's kind of two different types of aerospace work. There's one that's maintenance and repair and overhaul, and then there's new manufacturing, and the two can be greatly different. I come from the maintenance and repair world, and so that's really all I can give my perspective on. I can imagine that manufacturing is very different because a whole lot less grinding and a whole lot more fixturing and welding. But even in new manufacturing, there's all kinds of different niches. I mean, you might be welding a mount for a gun on a military helicopter, or you might be welding some aircraft ductwork out of titanium or Inconel that's 020 thousandths. It varies greatly. I'm going to try to give my experience in the maintenance and repair world. After about 12 or 13 years as a pipe welder, I transitioned into the aerospace repair world, and I got a job at Delta Airlines Tech Ops Center, where they did the maintenance and repair of engines and aircraft. So when someone finds out that I worked there, usually they say, well, I bet you welded a lot of aluminum. When you look at an aircraft, that's mostly what you see, but mostly what you see is not welded. The skin of the aircraft is usually what's considered unweldable. 7075, 2024, and alloys like that. But the internal engine components, the blades and the vanes and the ducting and the engine cases and the gearboxes, all of that stuff gets welded. I remember when I first started switching from the pipe welding world into the aerospace welding world, everything was just smaller, almost everything anyway. TIG torches were smaller, the tungsten diameter was smaller, filler metal was smaller. I was used to welding with a 1/8 electrode almost everything, with 332, mostly 1/8, and even sometimes bigger filler rods. A 1/16 was considered a large filler rod in that world, in the aerospace world. They went down smaller, 032, 030, 023, 020. I was used to a big 26 air-cooled style torch. It's like holding a chip and hammer after you get used to the number 20 water-cooled small size torch. So just getting used to all that stuff took a minute, but you get used to it. That's the way everything is. You just have to get used to it. Another thing that really surprised me was in pipe fitting world, I pretty much welded on carbon steel, stainless steel, and some Inconel. And then in aerospace, man, that opened wide up. Carbon steels and low alloy steels, very little carbon steel. I don't know if I ever saw any plain carbon steel, but there were some low alloy steels like 4130, 4140, 17-22. And then there's plenty of stainless, nickel alloys like Hastelloy, Inconel, Waspalloy, aluminum, magnesium, titanium, plenty of that. And most of the aluminum that I encountered was on gearboxes and starter housings and aluminum ducting. And then there's cobalt alloys, which are pretty much found in the hot section part of the engine. Another thing that kind of surprised me was just how much grinding was required on the maintenance and repair side. That's what I was in. I didn't do any, manufacturing of new parts. It was all maintenance and repair. And you can kind of divvy it up into three different categories on what you do in the maintenance repair side of aviation and aerospace. And that is crack repair, dimensional restoration, and then installing new components or rewelding new components in. Pretty much you can take most everything that's done and pigeonhole it into one of those three categories. So in crack repair, we had parts like hot section parts. A lot of those were made out of Hastelloy and then Haynes 188 and some other alloys, but they get so hot and they stay hot and they cycle hot and then they cool off and then they cycle. There's tons of vibration and stuff going on back there, and so they crack. And some of those hot section parts might have 100 cracks in them. They might only be 1/2 inches or 3/4 inch long, but they have a bunch of cracks. And so just prepping the part, grinding out the crack or burring out the crack, sometimes stop drilling the end of the crack, That takes a while. And then removing remnants of plasma spray coating prior to welding, prepping the weld for welding, that takes a while. And so you might be on a part like that for a few days, and it can be a little monotonous if you don't get your head right. So there's all kinds of crack repair in that, and in the gearboxes, and in engine cases. And then there's dimensional restoration, and a whole lot of that was done on nickel alloys on the blade and vanes, where something was out of tolerance. And so just like with a piston engine, when things get out of tolerance on wear, the engine gets less efficient. Same thing with a jet engine. But the biggest difference is with a jet engine, the parts are so expensive that it's economical to repair them usually instead of just replace them like you would on a piston engine. Another part of dimensional restoration was on gearboxes, and there might be just a chunk knocked out of a gearbox where something failed, or there might be somebody over torqued a stud and pulled out a big chunk of a magnesium or aluminum casting, and you might just build that back with straight up weld metal like 3D printing. And that takes a while. There's the prep work. You got to get it all clean and prepped. There might be a preheat. And that brings me to this point. There are repair manuals, and welding procedures within those repair manuals, and you've got to be willing to follow that stuff to the letter. Before we talk about installing new components, there is another task that I don't know where it fits, but it's pretty common, and that was removing retaining pins from engine cases. So you got these little pins, and they're probably about 3/32 in diameter, and they're really, really tightly pressed in to hold in clusters of vanes and things like that. And so you got to remove those things because they have to press in new pins, and they're so tightly pressed that they're very difficult to get out. So the operation goes something like this. You TIG weld a little mushroom head on the top of that pin, and you don't have that much access to get in there. It's a pretty tight spot. So you got to be careful not to overheat or melt the side of the case while you're doing that. And then once you get that little mushroom head on there, you let it cool the appropriate amount of time, attach some vice grip, slide hammer type pullers on there, and snatch that pin out. And hopefully it comes out. A lot of times that mushroom head just comes right off, and you have to re-weld another one on there, lather, rinse, repeat. Sometimes it takes 5 times before you get that stupid pin out. They do have sometimes some pneumatic pullers or some other type of tooling to help, but they can be really difficult, and it can be a really tedious and monotonous job. And I was texting with Roy just the other day, and he sent me a text that he was doing that he was pulling the pins out of a Rolls-Royce RB211 engine case, and I remember exactly what the deal was, so I don't miss that. But that's just the thing. There's always, in every job, there's things that you like and there's things you don't like so well, and you just have to sort of get your mind right and decide that you're going to get through it. You're going to enjoy it to the best of your ability, and wait until that better task comes along that you do enjoy. That's kind of how maintenance and repair aerospace welding is. So the third thing and the last thing is welding in new components. You know, a lot of times an engine case would have a boss about, let's say, 4 by 6 inch dimension, and it would be, the old one would have been worn or damaged, and they machined it out, and you just fit another one in there, back purge it, tack it all up, fit it up, fixture it up where it'll align with whatever connection was supposed to go there, and then weld it and maintain dimension. That was actually, pretty fun. Another job was, welding in new hubs into a titanium fan inlet case. There were over 100 of those things done, and those were all done in an argon chamber. So just to kind of wrap things up, some of the pros about working in aerospace are it's climate controlled. That's mostly for dimensional tolerance of the parts, but you get to benefit from that. So when it's really hot outside, you're not really hot. When it's super cold outside, you're comfortable. The pay is generally pretty good. I think it's probably a little bit better if you can work for a major airline, but still pretty good. Otherwise, the work is interesting and challenging, and you get to sleep in the same bed every night. And for some people, family men like me, that's a big deal. And some of the downsides are there can be a lot of grinding, and some of it's kind of precise grinding. Like they'll want you to hold just a few thousandths tolerance sometimes on something that you're blending with a Scotch-Brite sanding disc or something like that. And it can be kind of repetitive. There are some repetitive tasks. If you're not able to wrap your head around that, if you need to be outside hanging pipe, running pipeline, or if you need to be up walking on the red iron or connecting, big beams, then working in a tight little booth might not be for you. But I found it enjoyable, And I went to that from being outside and from being on a bunch of nuclear plants and paper mills and coal fire plants and all that. And I definitely found it to be a better path for me. Well, I hope this helps. This is just my perspective. If you're thinking about a career in aerospace welding, I encourage you to get some other perspectives first and then just decide if it seems like it's for you.
Well, that wraps up another Stubby episode. Do you have a question that you would like to have answered? We would love to answer your welding, fabrication, small business, or related question in a future episode. Send your question to weldingtipsandtrickspodcast@gmail.com and be sure to put Stubby in the subject line. You can also send us a DM on the Welding Tips and Tricks Podcast Instagram page or any of our personal pages at Superior Welding, Crummy Welding, or Weldmonger. Thank you again for all the support. Hope that you find this helpful. We will catch you on the next Stubby episode.